How do the street-level actuals change when the Daily Bugle starts paying for superheroes to expose the truth? And what kind of atmospheric pressure does it take for the Fantastic Four to launch an extraction mission directly into the afterlife? Greetings, my Omni fans. Pull up a chair and welcome to the Ordered Omnibus and our ongoing mission to map out the sheer insanity of the Marvel history, one page at a time. And today we're cracking open the third archive of April of 2004, and the stakes are getting incredibly dense. We're looking at the colossal debut of The Pulse, stripping back the curtain on the superhuman community. We're also tracking Matt Murdock's ruthless defense of Hell's Kitchen in Daredevil number 57, witnessing a cosmic-level breach in the hereafter in Fantastic Four 510, and checking in on the biological static hitting the mutant landscape over in Uncanny X-Men 440. But before we can turn to these tales, I need you to toughen the troops, quicken the quest for the quintessential lore, crack the Q switch to cue the continuity, cue the bell to catch our kinetic drops, and cast your questions into the comments to quickly quell the calculus. Let's get into those comics. Captain Marvel, Volume 5, Issue 20. Panel pundits, we pick up the action in the 22nd century where the history of Earth's fall is fully revealed. Ellie explains to Janice that while he inherited his father's longevity, it was more of a curse than a gift. He simply lived long enough to watch everyone he loved turn to dust. We learn that his mother was Songbird, a nice nod to the Thunderbolts continuity, and she and his sister Mimi were the real heroes who died fighting, while Rick Jones survived. Rick eventually fought back against the invaders, but as the flashback panels show, his heart just wasn't in it. He was a broken man fighting a losing war, eventually ending up as a battered life support dependent figure we see in the bunker. But the time for mourning is over, because the enemy is knocking at the door, literally. And as the thoom of the alien battering ram gets closer, Rick Jones makes one final command. He tells Janice to take the negavans. The transfer of power is instantaneous. When the squad of alien soldiers, a mix of Skrulls and other races from the Council of Aligned Worlds, reaches the room, they aren't met with a helpless old man. They're met with a fully powered Captain Marvel, who is done playing nice. Janice tells the lead soldier to freeze, and he means it literally. He manipulates the ambient photons in the room to withdraw every scrap of heat from the alien's body, flash freezing him in an instant. It is a terrifying display of cosmic power. Janice asks if that's instant enough, and then returns the favor by releasing all the stored energy in a gigantic fiery explosion that incinerates the rest of the squad. The sole survivor tries to beg for mercy, claiming that the genocide of humanity was self-defense because the humans were parasites who would have destroyed the galaxy. Janice doesn't care about their political justifications. He blasts the final soldier and delivers a chilling message to the Ashes. He isn't going to send a warning to their masters. He's going to tell them in person. Daredevil, Volume 2, Issue 57. We open in a gritty New York diner, my Wednesday warriors, where veteran reporter Ben Ulrich is having a heavy conversation with a mystery figure about the devil of Hell's Kitchen. Ben reveals a heavy-hitting truth that he knew Matt Murdock was the Daredevil long before the public outing, but he refused to write the story that would have made him rich. He explains that exposing Matt wouldn't just have been a scoop, it would have triggered a feeding frenzy among Daredevil's enemies that would have made Matt's life a living hell. Ben notes that the fear Matt inspires was so potent that it took a full year after his identity was leaked for anyone to actually make a play for his territory. Ben shifts the narrative to a flashback from 2 days ago on 10th Avenue, where the situation turned into an absolute circus of violence. Matt Murdock is standing alone against 100 silent Yakuza enforcers, and some of them were juiced up on mutant growth hormone. This isn't a fair fight, it's a slaughter. But Matt makes the first move, striking with a speed that defies logic. He starts absolutely ragdolling the mobsters, navigating through a sea of swords and knives, while the witnesses look on, unable to confirm if they're seeing a man or an urban legend at work. Ben explains that the Yakuza have been funneling all their profits from the mutant growth hormone, a drug that grants a temporary genetic super boost, turning an average criminal into a heavy hitter. And the battle hits a fever pitch when the Yakuza pin Matt against the wall with a barrage of gunfire, forcing him to leap into the air to survive the kill box. The chaos is finally broken not by a victory, but by the arrival of a SWAT team deploying flashbang grenades to seize control of the street. An FBI driver agent bursts out of the surveillance van, desperate to capture the vigilante, but in the confusion of the smoke and noise, Matt has vanished into thin air. He leaves behind a scene of devastation, but no trace of himself, maintaining the ghost-like status that keeps the FBI up at night. We return to the diner in the present when Ben wraps up his story, admitting he has no idea where Matt is now and just hopes his friend is still alive. The mystery listener finally speaks up, cutting through the crime drama with a personal plea that hits harder than a punch. It's revealed to be Mila Donovan, and she doesn't care about the gang wars or the drugs. She looks Ben dead in the eye and says, "Please help me find my husband." And the word drops like a bomb, leaving Ben completely shell-shocked as he realizes the blind lawyer didn't just hide his secret identity, he hid a secret marriage, changing the stakes of the game entirely. Elektra, Volume 3, Issue 33. Lore keepers, Aveni is a man completely consumed by his own impending doom, and frankly, he has every right to be. He's sweating bullets because Elektra Nachios is hunting him. To understand his sheer terror, we get a flashback to the peace treaty between the Montenegri and the Russian crime families. They were breaking bread, finalizing a non-interference agreement right up until Elektra walked in. She was an absolute force of nature, a crazed whirlwind of size and blood that gutted two syndicates before they even realized what hit them. And that memory is eating Aveni alive. Locked down in a heavily fortified safe house, that suffocating paranoia is tearing his operation apart from the inside. He has an army of guys surrounding the property, but the tension is so thick he ends up pulling a gun on his own son, Uri. Now, Aveni knows you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a ghost, but the ultimate nightmare becomes a reality when he wakes up in the dead of night, peeks out his bedroom window, and sees his entire security detail scattered across the lawn. The perimeter is completely dismantled, and not a single shot was fired. The pure dread peaks as Aveni looks up to see a shadow sliding over the skyline. Elektra comes shattering through the glass, but the unstoppable killing machine from his memories doesn't land gracefully. Instead, she hits the floor completely battered, gasping for air, and entirely exhausted. Aveni is left standing over her, utterly bewildered, wondering how this broken woman is the monster he's been terrified of for so long. It's an absolute brilliant bait and switch that flips the script entirely. Exiles, Volume 1, Issue 42. The story opens in the smoldering aftermath of a heartbreaking victory, with the Exiles standing amidst the wreckage of New York City, completely shattered by the death of Sunfire. Now, the emotional weight here is crushing because Morph is inconsolable, directing all of his rage at Mimic, who was possessed by the Brood when he delivered the killing blow. Even as Blink returns to step back into the leadership role, the dynamic is broken. Morph sees Calvin not as a teammate, but as a murderer, and that the hostility carries over as they're teleported into the dank, skeleton-filled Morlock tunnels of their next mission. Waiting for them there in the shadows is a familiar face with a gruesome twist. Gambit from the Weapon X team sitting alone with a cauterized stump where his arm used to be. He fills them in on the nightmare scenario involving his own team, explaining how King Hyperion decided he was done taking orders and forcefully removed the Talus and Gambit's arm to take control. It serves as a grim mirror to the Exile situation. While Blink and her team are falling apart emotionally, Weapon X has physically torn itself apart under the rule of a tyrant who decided to conquer the world rather than to save any of them. The calm before the storm ends abruptly when the Talus finally reveals the mission, and it's absolute nightmare fuel. The directive is cold and mathematical. There are 12 members between the two teams, but only 6 can be allowed to move on, meaning that they have to fight to the death to fill those spots. We cut to Times Square to see Hyperion sitting on a throne of webbing, surrounded by trophies of fallen heroes and waiting for a challenge. It sets the stage for a brutal conflict where the heroes aren't just fighting villains, they're fighting for the right to exist against a dark reflection of themselves. Fantastic Four, Volume 3, Issue 510. The Fantastic Four have done some wild stuff in their time, Story Sages, but breaking into the afterlife to steal back a soul is on a whole other level of crazy. Reed Richards has rigged a machine based on Dr. Doom's tech to physically transport the team to heaven to retrieve the thing. But the afterlife isn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. Instead of harps and halos, they're met with a legion of angels who are less guardian and more tactical assault squad, making it crystal clear that the living have no business trespassing on the realm of the dead. As they push deeper into the surreal landscape, the physical obstacles start to mirror their internal baggage. The environment shifts from a void to a twisted version of the Baxter Building, forcing them to confront the guilt tearing them apart. Johnny blames Reed for the chain of events involving Doctor Doom that got Ben killed, and Reed snaps back with cold hard logic that Johnny's inability to listen is what let Doom in the first place. It is a messy, painful airing of grievances happening while Ben watches from the other side with his late brother Daniel, seeing his family fracture while trying to save him. The real gut punch comes when they finally reach the barrier separating Ben from the true afterlife. It is a Brobdingnagian impenetrable door that Ben himself cannot open. And his brother Dan reveals that Ben has been subconsciously keeping the team away to hide a devastating truth. The obstacle keeping the thing out of heaven isn't a divine judgment or a cosmic rule. It's a construct of his own best friend's intellect. The door barring his entry is based on one of Reed Richards' own designs, proving that even in death, Ben cannot escape the shadow of Mr. Fantastic. The Pulse, Volume 1, Issue 1. We open with a look at the hierarchy of the news in the Marvel Universe. You, my Canon Keepers, have Spider-Man vs. Dr. Octopus brawl getting on the front page, while Ben Ulrich's hard-hitting journalism on the Yakuza is buried on page 17. It really establishes where Ben is in his career right now, respected but sidelined. Meanwhile, Jessica Jones is trying to get her life together, waking up at Luke Cage's place and heading to the Daily Bugle for a job interview. This leads to a surprising sit-down with J. Jonah Jameson, who admits that his crusade against costume vigilantes is actually hurting circulation. He offers Jessica a role as vigilante analyst for a new section called The Pulse, proving that Jonah is nothing if not pragmatic when it comes to selling papers. The negotiation scene is classic Jessica. She isn't just looking for a paycheck. She demands health insurance and a stable contract because, as she reveals to Jameson, she's pregnant with Luke Cage's child. Jameson, seeing dollar signs, agrees on the condition that the Bugle gets the exclusive on the baby. It's worth nothing that Jameson actually has a grudging respect for Jessica after she rescued his foster daughter, Maddie Franklin, back in the Alias series. However, he doesn't let her know this when he recruits Ben Ulrich. In a stroke of manipulative genius, he tells Ben that Jessica is a B-level washout, and that section is really about redeeming Ben's career, effectively playing them against each other to ensure the paper succeeds. And while all this corporate maneuvering is happening, a grim discovery is being made in Central Park. A pretzel vendor notices something floating in the reservoir, which turns out to be the body of a woman. The police determined that she was dropped in a flyby, suggesting that's the superpowered perpetrator. And this isn't just some random crime, it's a doozy of a story that Jameson demanded for the launch of The Pulse. It sets the tone for this series immediately, grounded gritty journalism colliding with high-flying world of superheroes. The police identified the woman, and while we don't know who she is yet, it's clear that this murder is going to be the first big test for Ben and Jessica's new partnership. The Uncanny X-Men, Volume 1, Issue 440. So, my archivists, we open this chapter with Archangel having a heart-to-heart with Lucinda Guthrie about his relationship with her daughter Paige. Warren is terrified because he feels responsible for Paige's temporary death during the mission they went back in on Uncanny X-Men 419. He tries to justify his hesitation by calling her an untrained novice, which is frankly ridiculous if you remember that Husk was a founding member of Generation X and arguably the most dedicated student there. Paige overhears this and absolutely lets him have it, telling him she's 19 and she's done being treated like a child. She hits him with a brutal low blow, shouting, "No wonder Betsy stopped loving you." It cuts deep, and you know what? Fuck her. We've always known Angel was an idiot, but my God. While dysfunction is winning in the farmhouse, Tate is taking over in the woods. Chester Cabot catches Josh and Julie together and immediately assumes the worst, refusing to believe his daughter would willingly be with a mutie. He strikes Julia with his power armor, sending her flying into the lake, which is just a horrific display of bigotry over parenting. Polaris arrives to save the day, acting with her usual confidence as the mistress of magnetism. However, she makes a fatal calculation error. The Cabot armor is made of carbon composite, not metal. Her powers are useless and she takes a missile directly to the chest. It's a shocking reminder that raw power doesn't mean much when you don't know who you're fighting. And back at the homestead, the human threat proves to be just as dangerous as the superpowered one. Sheriff Pete arrives, ostensibly to help, but his mask slips when he sees Lucinda holding hands with Ray. His jealousy explodes into a racist tirade and he pulls a gun on Lucinda, proving that his protection was always about possession. Nightcrawler ends the standoff instantly with a teleport punch, but there's no time to celebrate. The Cabots are done. The issue comes to a close with the family spotting three armored figures marching towards the house. The Romeo and Juliet story is over, and now it's just a war for survival. Wolverine, Volume 3, Issue 3. We pick up this emotional roller coaster, my vital visionaries, back in Cerveza Fria, where Nestor, the bar owner, is trying to manage the newborn baby girl Wolverine brought in. When he tries to hand the crying infant to Casey Lathrop, she immediately backs up and admits she doesn't really do babies. This leaves Logan staring off the balcony, drowning in guilt and telling Cassie he's not much of a man at all. This triggers a flashback revealing the brutal truth. Logan didn't murder her mother. Rojas died from the exertion of childbirth because she was left completely alone after the guards either died or fled. It's a tragic realization for Logan, who feels responsible for the fact that no one was there to save her. Realizing that he can't dump the kid on Nestor, who already has 3 children and a wife to answer to, Logan heads to the Rojas estate to find a solution, only to find the place being stripped by looters. And this leads to a classic Wolverine moment where the thug pulls a knife on him in the bedroom. Logan warns him, but when the guy lunges, Logan pops his claws and slices the weapon and a few fingers to ribbons. In the aftermath of the violence, he finds a framed photo of Rojas and her family. Hidden inside the frame is a letter from her sister, Maria Murillo, in Evanston, Illinois, giving Logan a destination and a chance to make things right. Logan rides north to track down Maria and breaks the news that her sister is dead. It's a tense sit-down, but Logan delivers a masterclass of persuasion. He convinces Maria to take the unlaundered money she never touched and use it to raise the innocent child, effectively making something right out of her sister's wrongdoings. The story wraps up in El Paso with the Murillo family adopting the baby and naming her Angelica. Nestor tells Logan he did what a man would do, finally giving him the redemption that he was seeking. The issue closes with Logan riding to Oregon and showing up at Cassie Lathrop's door in the rain, ready to move forward. X-Men, Volume 1, Issue 153. We jump 150 years into one of the bleakest futures the X-Men history has ever seen, my comic book collective, also known as the Here Comes Tomorrow arc. The world is ruled by Beast, who is actually possessed by the sentient bacteria Sublime, and has spent a century conducting twisted genetic experiments to create a master race. We see the horrific results in Pan-Africa, where the insectoid herds are managed by his creations. But the real game changer is the resurrection of Jean Grey. Beast has awoken the Phoenix to wipe out the last remnants of Xavier's dream, but Jean is essentially a blank slate, confused and manipulated into believing the X-Men are the villains. It's a terrifying setup because it shows us a version of Hank McCoy who has completely abandoned his humanity for cold, calculated evolution. And meanwhile, the Resistance is a ragtag group that really highlights how desperate things have become. We have Wolverine leading the charge alongside Beak, Tom Skylark with his Sentinel rover, and in a wild twist, Cassandra Nova and Maria Johansson are piloting the X-Plane. They scramble to save the telepathic whale named Mermax from the Beast's crawlers, leading to one of the most heartbreaking moments in the story. And during that firefight, Rover is destroyed, and watching Tom Skylark mourn a Sentinel really drives home the theme that humanity is found in the most unlikely places. It's a chaotic, high-stakes battle that feels like the final stand for mutant kind, but the skirmish at sea is just the prelude to the main event. The Phoenix arrives at the ruins of the X-Mansion, bringing with her a rain of blood that drives the Defenders insane with hunger. It is an apocalyptic visual that signals the end is nigh. The remaining Stepford Cuckoos are trying to hold reality together, but they're outmatched. The issue ends with Logan staring down a godlike, fiery Jean Grey, and instead of fear, he just offers the classic Wolverine greeting. "Morning, Jeannie. I see you come dressed for a tussle." It is the perfect cliffhanger, mixing total hopelessness with Logan's trademark grit. And that draws the curtain on the third part of April 2004 Deep Dive, bringing another heavy chapter of continuity to a close, my Omni fans. What an incredibly dense month of continuity this has been, forcing us to witness the Fantastic Four shatter the boundaries of life and death, the street-level heroes scramble to hold the line, and the mutant nation deal with an absolute biological trauma. But don't close that archive just yet, because the timeline never sleeps. Next time we'll be diving straight into the finale of the April 2004 arc, tracking the heavy hitters as they deal with insane internal diagnostics in Avengers 79, watching Peter Parker get dragged into a heavy mystical brawl in Amazing Spider-Man 504, establishing a scientific safe harbor to scratch in the Ultimate Fantastic Four #3, and finally hitting the absolute explosive ceiling in the Ultimates 13. And remember to quicken your quest for the quintessential lore, crack that Q switch to cue the continuity, query the bell to catch our kinetic drops, and to cast your questions in the comments to quickly quell the calculus. So make sure you keep your reading order strict and your continuity cataloged. We'll be seeing you next time. These are the apps we'll be focusing on next week. Same ordered time, same ordered omnibus.